Today I'll show you an easy way to budget with your current allowance, and then we'll figure out about how much you need to make as an adult. So here's a simple budgeting tracker. In it you'll list everything you spend money on, how much you plan to spend on each item, how much you actually spend, and then the difference between the two. Now let's take an example from a student I worked with. She had an allowance of $65 every week, and she spent most of her money on food, clothing, shoes, accessories, etc., and fun. On average, she would spend about $7 a day on food, which makes $49 a week, and then she would spend about $6 on clothes and about $10 on hanging out with friends on the weekends. When you add up all her budgeted money, it equals 65, and this number should match the income that you wrote earlier. This last week, she only spent $40 on food because her parents took her out a few times, so she spent a little bit more on clothes and the same amount on fun. Now let's look at how much money she has left over. She saved a little money on food, but then she spent that extra money on clothes. When you total everything up, it looks like she didn't save any money, but at least she's also not in debt. If this number ended up being negative, that'd be bad. That would mean she was in debt. And the whole point of budgeting is to keep yourself from overspending. Another goal is to save money. On that note, what's missing from this table? I think you know what I'm going to say. Savings. You should always be setting aside some money for savings. This has a lot of benefits, but we'll talk about that in another lesson. Okay, let's move on to part 2. How much do adults need to make? Be aware that the list of expenses for adults is much, much, much longer. Are you ready to see it? Take a deep breath. Here it is. This is a good time for you to pause the video and take a guess at what each one of these items will cost. And then we can compare numbers. Make sure you take into consideration what type of lifestyle you'll want. So what type of apartment you want to live in, what kind of car you want to drive, that type of thing. Okay, ready to compare? Here are some estimates based off of Los Angeles cost of living, with a 1-bedroom apartment alone, no roommates, and a car that costs about $15,000. Keep in mind that these numbers will vary from person to person. So some people might want to put more into retirement and savings. You might want a nicer car, or you might drive more. This number is going to be higher if you get a master's. If you don't drive well, your car insurance is going to be higher. Maybe you don't have pets. There's different ways to save money too. You can share an apartment so your rent cost goes down. Your apartment might cover utilities. And maybe you don't have cable TV, or maybe you don't have a smartphone. How dare I suggest that? You might be thinking, wow, this is a lot of money. What does my annual salary need to be in order to pay for all of this? Well, if you add up an average of all these numbers, it comes out to be about $3,200 a month. And then you multiply that by 12 months to get your annual salary, and that's $38,400. But don't forget about taxes. There's always taxes. And I'll teach you more about that in another lesson. But with taxes, you actually have to make something more like $58,000 a year. As I said before, your salary will vary depending on your circumstances and what state you live in. For example, some states don't charge state taxes, and they have lower cost of living. Also, your salary should grow higher as you gain more experience. Now you can see why money causes a lot of stress for many people, but the smarter you get about it, the more successful and confident you'll be, which is a win in my mind. Next week we'll have our first special guest to launch our career series. And also, you can download an easy spreadsheet to budget with at beyondcollege.org. Thank you for joining us!